Hello,
today
Beth.
we'll
Welcome
be
to
down
sunny
under
Sydney.
Town.
Oh, thank you for having me.
In the sultry streets of colonial Singapore, an ominous visitor brings darkness and death. Harriet Gordon, now finding her footing as a teacher at a girls' school, grapples with the uncertainty in her relationship with Robert Curran. Recently back from a long stint in Kuala Lumpur, Curran's hopes for a long-awaited promotion are dashed when the post is handed to an old foe from Scotland Yard, deepening his frustration. The arrival of the Colonial Foreign Secretary, Sir Henry Cunningham, stirs memories of one of Curran's most troubling unsolved cases. When a young girl mysteriously dies at a ball held in the secretary's honor, Curran finds himself at odds with his new superior. Confiding his growing suspicions to Harriet, he is devastated when she inadvertently betrays his trust, placing his career in jeopardy. But with a second death shifting the investigation's course, Harriet and Curran must work together to bring justice to a grieving family and salvage their fragile bond before it's too late.
Alison, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, before we start talking about your book, it's a very important day in Australia here, AFL Grand Final Day or Australian Football Grand Final Day. Swans or Brisbane?
Well, I'm an Essendon supporter, so I have no skin in this game whatsoever. But and they're both former Victorian teams, so I don't even know which way to go. But I'm going to say Swannies. Go Swannies.
Well done. Good answer. Okay, so Alison, the end of the series, just give us a bit of a rundown of generally from the first book to the fifth.
Okay, well, we're talking about the Harriet Gordon Mysteries, which were the first book was published back in 2017. It's a historical mystery series set in Singapore in 1910. Starts in 1910. We're now into 1911, and there's two main protagonists in the book. The eponymous Harriet Gordon, of course, of the series title. Yes, and there was something quite intriguing about that whole history of Singapore. I think a lot of fiction around Singapore tends to concentrate very much on the awful years of World War II, and they really were absolutely dreadful. And there's not so much fiction set in the earlier colonial period. And I can't, why I picked 1910, I really have no idea, because absolutely nothing happened in Singapore in 1910.
Step into the rugged world of Plymouth, 1620, where Sarah, a courageous woman, embarks on an unforgiving journey in the New World. Amidst the treacherous unknown, she faces starvation, death, and the harsh realities of early colonial life. On the wings of the red-tailed hawk, masterfully weaves historical authenticity with an inspiring tale of resilience, as Sarah discovers her inner strength to survive against overwhelming odds. This award-winning novel, lauded for its evocative writing and powerful portrayal of women's triumphs in history, is a must-read for lovers of gripping historical fiction. Join Sarah on her harrowing yet empowering journey and witness the indomitable spirit that defines the true pioneers of America.
Yeah, my writers group said, "Stop killing people." Don't ever be a secondary character in my books, because you'll die.
So, just obviously, authors have good times and authors have bad times. Tell me about how you felt when the publishing company didn't want to publish book 4 and 5.
Well, I was saying, one part of me was sanguine about it, because that's the way they work. It's like publishing is like a game of snakes and ladders, and you finally think you've got there. Oh my God, I've got this big 5 traditional publisher in the US publishing my book. I've been to New York. I've met the editor. I've got, my career is now set. Yeah. And then sure, you hit the snake and down you go again. So yes, on one part sort of sanguine about it, but on the other hand, it's hard not to feel rejected or hard not to feel devastated about it, because I would have loved to have seen them take that. I mean, it was never going to be a long series anyway, and it was going to be at least another two, the two books I've written. But at the bottom line, these decisions are not made by the editors; they're made by the bean counters in the accounting department. And if your print sales, not necessarily your ebook sales or audio sales, if your print sales aren't up to snuff, then unfortunately you that's it. They're notorious.
It's a hard game, isn't it?
It's a very hard game, and you can't be in it long term like I've been without developing a bit of a thick skin. So yes, as I said, one part of me totally sanguine about it, the other part going, oh, blow.
In one of four, Travis Davis takes you on an unforgettable journey from the battle-scarred trenches of World War I to the solemn grounds of Arlington National Cemetery. Through the eyes of an unknown soldier, discovered by a young French girl and immortalized in his 100-year-old diary, this novel intertwines the harrowing experiences of the Western Front with a modern-day story of a father and son, estranged yet brought together by the soldier's legacy. As they retrace the soldier's final days, this poignant narrative reveals the unspeakable horrors of war, the enduring bonds of family, and the timeless pursuit of honor. One of Four is a compelling exploration of courage, sacrifice, and the healing power of remembrance.
Conquest of England in 1066. The novel vividly portrays a kingdom in crisis following the death of King Edward the Confessor. Harold, the Earl of Wessex, is hastily crowned king but faces immediate threats from Viking and Norman invaders. With meticulous research, Senlac brings to life the battles and intricate politics of the era. This meticulously crafted work is poised to be a landmark in historical fiction, captivating fans with its authenticity and emotional depth.
I mean, you've had some great reviews, and obviously I know how popular your books are. What's next? I mean, the series is finished, so what's next?
I don't think we've seen the end of Harriet and Robert or Curran. I think there's a couple more stories in there, but obviously it's got to be reframed into either a different series or standalones or something like that. Personally, I'm actually ready to take a break. I'm not committing to any new books I just want a bit of time out to play with my words again and not be beholden to deadlines. Even if they're my own deadlines, they're still deadlines, and they've got to be met. And I kind of just want to go and play in the garden and spend time with my grandchildren and just actually have a bit of a break and just let the muse back in again. She's under my desk drinking gin as we speak. She's had enough.
In the charming but secretive town of Wallingford Heights, 1893, 3 hairdressers and a seamstress are more than just masters of style. They're amateur sleuths. When a chilling triple murder rocks their sleepy Massachusetts town and a young suffragist is wrongfully accused, these 4 spirited women from the Vine Salon, one of America's first, must unravel a web of dark secrets. Using their keen ears for gossip and sharp minds, Estelle, Chastity, Mary Lou, and Clara dive into a thrilling mystery that intertwines the dangers of the past with the promise of a changing future.
Discover the extraordinary life of George Matcham, the man who dared to cross continents in an era of exploration and intrigue. Born in Bombay under the East India Company's watchful eye, George embarked on 3 monumental overland journeys between Asia and England. His adventures set the stage for a remarkable story, culminating in his marriage to the beloved sister of the future Lord Admiral Nelson. Through his intimate connections with Nelson and the enchanting Emma Hamilton, George's life is vividly brought to life with authentic period press clippings and eyewitness accounts. Dive into a most unsettled man for an unprecedented glimpse into the private life of an 18th century English gentleman, while experiencing the enduring love story of Nelson and Emma from a fresh and captivating perspective.
Why Singapore?
Well, why Singapore? Well, as I said, I did actually live there. I can't believe that's like 20 years ago now. It just still seems like yesterday, and is still kind of in my heart. One of my second homes. We go back fairly frequently, purely for research, of course. Nothing to do with the fact I love the place. I do love the place, and yes, there was something quite intriguing about that whole history of Singapore. I think a lot of fiction around Singapore tends to concentrate very much on the awful years of World War II, and they really were absolutely dreadful. And there's not so much fiction set in the earlier colonial period. And I can't, why I picked 1910, I really have no idea, because absolutely nothing happened in Singapore in 1910. So I was free to sort of fill it with as many murders as I wanted over that time. But it is that mix of cultures all coming together. And also a very key character in the series is actually the climate. Because
Right.
if you've ever been to Singapore, it's a very hot, tropical, humid climate, and it does dictate a lot of how people, as we know from our own hot weather here in Australia, it really can affect how people interact and how they live their lives on a daily basis. So as a historian, I had so much fun doing that, and so much fun digging up all the original characters, real characters that were extant at the time.
Darlene Adams is a free-spirited woman who is beautiful, can shoot, and she doesn't break a promise. Ruthlessly ditched after being in a relationship for 20 years, Darlene takes work on a remote cattle property. 2 years later, she's out of work but retains the Queensland title of pistol champion. Now her eyes are on the national titles held in Western Australia. En route, she learns about her missing niece and takes things into her own hands.
So yes, it's been fun sort of rebuilding that world that no longer exists in Singapore. It's a very modern go-ahead city, and it's hard to find those old colonial roots in it, but they're there if you look.
So describe to me the Singapore of 1910. How is it different to today?
Well, the Singapore of 1910 was I mean, the island itself is only I don't think it's even the size of Manhattan. I think I read somewhere. It's really quite a small island. But back then, Singapore itself was actually just a really tiny little town situated where it is now. The colonial population consisted of a mix of British and Germans and Americans, Armenians. There was a huge range of different nationalities living within the city. But of course, it was part of the Straits Settlements. It was governed by the British, and they had their governor in residence in what is now the Astana, which is the presidential palace off Orchard Road there. And that British colonial stamp was very firmly felt on Singapore, Penang, and Malacca. Those were the three Strait settlements.
Tell me about the visitor.
Yes, he's an interesting character. I came across him, the real person on which this Sir Henry Cunningham is based. It's not actually Lord Harcourt. I was just looking for the name of who the Colonial State Secretary was at the time, and up came Lord Harcourt. And as I read through his general Wikipedia entry, I discovered he was a really nasty piece of work. He was involved in a particularly nasty ring of perverts, I suppose, for one trying to keep it low.
And he doesn't get on with Robert Curran, does he? They have a bit of a...
No, they have a history. Curran crossed swords with Cunningham back in his days at Scotland Yard, when Sir Henry's behind the doors proclivities came to Curran's notice, but the British society being what it was all hushed up, swept under the carpet, and it was suggested to Curran he go and find greener pastures, which is how he ends up in Singapore.
Did you find it difficult to go from sort of like romance writing to this genre?
no, not at all, because I was already incorporating mysteries into my romances. They weren't staying away. And as I said, it's what I write, so what I read. So I had sort of assimilated a lot of the mechanisms of how to write a mystery, almost subconsciously, without having to go off and do courses on how to write crime stories or mysteries.
Who is going to walk into the shop and buy the Harriet mysteries?
Well, the first 3 were published by a traditional publisher in the US, and then they dropped me for the 4th and 5th one. Thank you very much. However, I did discover when I sort of let it be known that I was probably going to have to stop the series after I was inundated by readers, mostly from the US. Absolutely, they wanted to know what happened. How's this going to end? So I finished the series for myself and for those readers as well. I think my readers, I have a lot of middle-aged women, but I also have a lot of men who read my stories, and I don't attract the younger crowd so much. You won't ever see me on TikTok, because that's not where my readers are.
You were contracted to write some Australiana. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, do you just want to tell us about that?
Yes, sure. In fact, this was Harlequin in Australia. They had a very good look at Singapore Sapphire, which is the first of the Harriet Gordon ones, and at that particular point in time, it didn't fit. Obviously, didn't fit their output. And the editor, who I was already published through their digital only first, she sort of said, "Well, do you have anything Australian?" I set 3, as I said, a series of 3 interrelated books. Yeah, they're standalone, but they are interrelated in that the town and a lot of the town characters go through, but with different protagonists as the hero and heroine, all the way through to the end, where I pick up 2 of the child characters who were in the previous 2 books, and they become the hero and heroine of the last book. So it tied up very nicely at the end of those 3 books. So it was more concentrating on the strong female characters, and the life in those pioneering goldfields towns, which was pretty rough and pretty hard.
It's great having somebody on the show that has been as successful as you.
Oh, thank you.
And congratulations on the series, and thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Paul. It's been a pleasure.